To become your best self, you have to embrace your dark side. Now, that might sound like a preposterous idea to you right now, but stick with me and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm also going to ask you to forget everything that you have been told about personal development and becoming your best self. I'm going to ask you to forget about positive daily habits, affirmations, practicing gratitude, all those things, because they do all play a part in our personal development, but not today. Today we are going to focus on understanding what your shadow or dark side is. And then we're going to talk about recognizing the benefits of embracing your dark side. And then we're going to go through some action steps that will help you so that when you leave this post, you can start working on becoming your best self. But since embracing your dark side does seem like such a preposterous idea, and maybe it even seems counterproductive to becoming your best self, it might be helpful for us to start small. We're going to get into Jungian psychology here in a minute, but before we get there, let's start small and talk about the fact that everything that exists in nature has a dark side. And every quintessential story that man has ever concocted has a dark side. For example, you need nourishment to survive. And in order to receive that nourishment, you have to take another life, whether it be plant-based or animal-based life. You have to take another life. So right there, inherent in your survival is a dark side. Take religion for another example. All religions that I'm aware of, except for I think maybe Buddhism doesn't, but whatever. All religions that I'm aware of, there is a character who represents good and a character who represents evil. For example, God versus Satan. So even in our religions, there is an inherent dark side. And I give a couple more posts in the narrative, I give a couple more examples in the narrative post. But the point is, if you really think about it, there is a dark side to everything that exists. And this dark side must have been created for a reason. So is it really so preposterous to think that you could experience personal growth by embracing your dark side? No, I don't think it is. So what do I mean by dark side? So I told you we were going to get into some Jungian psychology. We're not going to get that into it. But Carl Jung was a psychologist and psychiatrist, and he founded analytical psychology, which is a form of psychology that focuses on analyzing current problems and current issues and using them to better yourself rather than focusing on past traumas, basically. So he was focused on the person and helping that person transform into what they had the potential to be. And he was the first psychologist actually to introduce the concept of introverted and extroverted personalities. And so I'm sure you've heard of that. And you may have heard of the MBTI personality types. And those were developed based on Jung's work. So that's kind of who this guy is. But plus, not only that, he is very highly regarded and had a heavy influence on Jordan Peterson, which you know, if you've seen any of my work so far, you know I love Jordan Peterson. He's a heavy influence on me. So Jung influenced Peterson. So of course I am very interested in any of his work, in his psychological theories. But Jung believed that the psyche, or the center of our thoughts and feelings, is composed of 5 areas. So our psyche is composed of the ego, the persona, the shadow, the anima, and the animus. And we talked about the ego in a prior post called The Simplest Way to Conquer Your Greatest Enemy. So check that post out. If you go to the website and do a search, you can find it if you would like to learn more about the ego. But today we're going to focus on the shadow. So your shadow isn't necessarily what it sounds like. It's not necessarily evil. It is in essence the opposite of your persona. So your persona is the you that you show to the outside world. The one that you use to kind of conform to the world and to fit in, and so that you can find your place in society. Now your shadow is the opposite. This is the part of you that you hide from the outside world. And your shadow possesses all of the traits that you or society deem unacceptable. So because you think they're unacceptable and maybe are going to keep you separated from society, you instinctually repress this part of yourself, these traits. And then what happens is they end up floating around in your subconscious, and these traits still end up showing in you whether you want them to or not. So, why would you want to embrace those parts of you, your shadow self? Well, Jung believed that the only pathway to completion as a human being, or the only way to be your best self, was through the discovery of the shadow. So, in other words, to bring your shadow traits to your consciousness instead of keeping them locked away in your unconscious. And this might seem like a trite saying or something you've heard so many times, but it's true that we cannot change anything about ourselves until we accept it and bring it under our control. So that's why we want to embrace our shadow, so that we can understand it and bring it under our control. So let's talk about some specific benefits of doing that. Because I'm guessing that you're not convinced yet that you really want to deal with embracing your shadow, and even this post is probably not going to convince you of that. But my goal is that hopefully I will intrigue you enough and spike your curiosity enough that maybe you will go on to learn more about your shadow on your own. So I've outlined 4 benefits of embracing your dark side. 1, you will know true morality. 2, you will know how to control your aggression. 3, you will stop projecting your shadow onto other people. And 4, you will ultimately realize your full potential, which is what the expectation gaps is all about. So let's talk about true morality. So being a moral person doesn't mean that you're good 100% of the time. But what it does mean is that you're aware of your shadow, you're aware of your bad side, you're aware that you can do horrible things. You are capable of doing horrible things. But you also know how to control that side of you. That's what makes you a moral person. And most people act in moral ways, or they call them moral ways, only because they're afraid. They're afraid of getting caught and being punished in some way. You know, either they're going to go to jail, they're going to go to hell, they're going to be shunned by their family, whatever. That's not true morality. True morality is if you take the fear out of the equation, the fear of getting caught, and you still act in a moral way. That's what true morality is. And I learned this in my auditing training, and also Jordan Peterson refers to this, but there are 5% of the population that are going to, in auditing we learned, there's 5% of the population that is going to commit fraud no matter what. Doesn't matter, they're going to do it, they're going to find a way. There's 5% of the population that would never ever commit fraud no matter what. The rest of us, and I'm in this 90%, the rest of us, the 90%, could commit fraud under the right circumstances. And a lot of us probably wouldn't, and we don't think we would, but given the right set of circumstances, you could and would. So, with that in mind, I want to give this example. So I have to kind of bring forth the point of true morality. So I have been preparing taxes for 20 years, which is kind of scary to say out loud. But anyways, I have found in my experience that it is true that 90% of the people will tiptoe over the tax line if they don't think they're going to get caught and they don't think what they're doing is really a big deal. You know, it seems immaterial dollar amount to them or whatever it is. Once in a great while, you get someone in that 5% who is going to follow the tax law to the T no matter what. And that's the truly moral person. And you can see it when they are making the decision of how they're going to report something on their tax return. They will hem and haw because they want to go with the immoral answer. They want to toe over that line because they know they're probably not going to get caught. But then they just can't let themselves do it. That is the 5% that is truly moral. Because the tiptoers are only going to make the morally correct decision if they think they're not going to get caught. Alright, so I think that I've said enough about that. Alright, on to controlling your aggression, which is another benefit of facing your dark side or your shadow. So when you repress your aggression, it comes out in full force in harmful ways. It's going to come out somehow. But if you integrate your shadow into your psyche, into your consciousness, you also integrate your aggression into your consciousness, which means you can find healthy outlets for it because you can deal with it. So picture this. You're driving to work and someone cuts you off and ticks you off and just sets you off, in a bad way for the day. But you repress those feelings. Then you get to work and right away your boss lays into you for something that you're not even responsible for. Something got screwed up, but you're not even responsible for it. Now your blood is boiling, but again, you repress it because you're scared of losing your job. Then a client calls, and you've been working on this project forever. They keep making changes to it. They have another change, and you're supposed to be done, almost done with this project. Again, you are so frustrated, but you repress it because you are scared that you're going to lose a client if you don't. So then, at the end of the day, you get home, and someone, one of your kids, someone you live with, your significant other, whoever, has left their shoe in the middle of the walkway or the entryway again, and you go ballistic. Okay? I think we've all been there. We've all been in some similar situation where you just go off the rails over something so insignificant, something that you're not even really that mad about because all this aggression has been repressed and now it's coming out in a harmful way. And it's going to come out and it's going to harm the people that you love and that you are closest to. That's why it is so important for you to be able to just accept those aggressive feelings that you have. Now, that doesn't mean you have to express them to someone else. That doesn't mean you got to go tell off your boss, start yelling at your client or something. But it means you recognize the fact that you're getting angry. You don't just put it aside. You process those feelings and think about it, what you can do, what your alternatives are, what you can do to control it. And then you find an appropriate outlet for them, whatever that might be for you. So those are the benefits of facing your aggression. Now, the next benefit of accepting your shadow is that you would stop projecting your insecurities onto other people. Now, if you're not familiar with the term projecting or projection, according to Wikipedia, I'm going to read this here. Psychological projection is a defense mechanism in which the human ego defends itself against unconscious, see, that's what we're talking about, defends itself against unconscious impulses or qualities, that's the shadow, by denying their existence in themselves while attributing them to others. So you're putting your shadow onto someone else. And another amazing mind who I really like to listen to is Alan Watts. And he was a British author, but I would say he was also somewhat of a philosopher. And I'm going to paraphrase something that I heard him say about the shadow. I don't know if this is exactly what he said, but he said, when you accept the devil in yourself, your shadow, when you accept the devil in yourself, you don't project it onto other people. So that's why it's so important that we try to embrace our shadow so that we're not trying to find a scapegoat for our shortcomings. And I'll throw an overly simplistic example for this one. Let's say that you find yourself grumbling about the laziness of anyone who's on welfare, for example, or anyone who's getting some kind of social assistance. In part, you are grumbling about this because you know, but you don't want to face the fact that you could very well have been that person who needed to be on welfare. You are capable of making the same decisions that they made that could have gotten you there or whatever, been born into a bad situation, whatever the case is. You know you could be there too, and that scares you. That's why you project that onto someone else, and that's why your shadow, then you start to feel that you could be that lazy person too, and you project it onto someone else. And we all have thoughts like this. I mean, it's just human. Nothing wrong with the thought per se, but the key is to accept it, not repress it. And then maybe even once you accept it and you face it, you can even laugh at yourself for how absurd it is to think that every single person who is on welfare is lazy. Okay. The last one, the last benefit is that you will get to realize your full potential eventually if you work on this enough. So, I'm going to paraphrase Jordan Peterson here, and he said, by suppressing the worst in yourself, you preclude the possibility of the best. So if you're trying to keep your shadow under wraps all the time, you're never going to realize your full potential, is how I read that. And then I'll circle this back around to my other main man, Abraham Maslow, and his hierarchy of needs. So at the pinnacle of the hierarchy is self-realization, no, self-actualization, or your best self. And in order to reach that pinnacle, you have to meet your love and belonging needs, which are the third tier up, third out of 5 tiers. Now, a few components of your love belonging needs are trust, giving and receiving affection, being part of a group. Those all fall under the category of your love and belonging needs. And I contend that in order to meet these components, you have to embrace your dark side, because you have to accept and integrate all parts of yourself into your psyche in order to truly feel loved and belong, and a sense of belonging. And I'm going to focus just on receiving and giving affection for a minute. So I would say if you haven't at least partially integrated your dark side, you'll have a difficult time fully receiving and giving affection, because you're going to project your insecurities onto whoever you're in the relationship with, and you're going to put up your defenses. And one of two things is going to happen. One, you're either going to smother the other person, or you're going to just ignore the other person and kind of have a cold shoulder to them. And the reason you're doing either one of those things is the same. You are afraid that they are going to figure out who you really are, and they are going to abandon you. But you deserve to meet your love and belonging needs. You deserve to live the fulfilling life you were meant to live. That means you're going to have to embrace your dark side so that you aren't closing, either smothering or shutting out people that you need in order to meet your love and belonging needs. Okay. So those are the 4 benefits. Now on to the action steps. According to Peterson, of course, again, I'm going to cite Peterson here, but he said to develop your shadow, you have to face the bitter truth about yourself. And if you can face the bitter truth, and the reason you want to do that is you can then open up a dialogue with yourself, and you can learn to control your shadow if you can face it. So he offers a couple suggestions for doing that. He said, for one thing, you could observe yourself when you feel resentful. And what that means is when you start feeling resentful, notice what made you feel that way. Notice what your thoughts and feelings, what thoughts and other feelings accompany that resentment. And keep note of that and analyze that, and then eventually you'll be able to take control of it. He also said you could observe when you feel oppressed, because oppression leads to bitterness. And so you could be oppressed at work, you could be oppressed just in life in general, you could even be oppressing yourself. And that will eventually turn into bitterness. So again, you want to notice when you're starting to feel bitter, and what caused you to feel bitter, and what other thoughts and feelings are coming along, are being drawn up with that bitterness. So if you can analyze and understand your resentment, your oppression, and your bitterness, you can control the actions that accompany them. And then what that's going to do is going to help you transform the way that you react to the outside world. And really, that's what embracing the dark side is all about. So if you can do those things, you have embraced your dark side. Alright, of course I put a worksheet together for you guys. It's going to help you go from inspiration to action. It's going to help you digest this post a little bit and figure out what you can do to become your best self by embracing your dark side. And until next time, stay curious!